Welcome to another episode of Stories from the Womb. This week, I am joined by a lady called Shannon, and I don't really know Shannon. I met Shannon at a home birth conference recently. She was on a parents panel talking about HBACs, which are home births after cesarean. So, Shannon, if you don't mind, I'm going to let you talk the listeners through because I came away thinking I want to know more. All I really got was that you had a home birth after a cesarean, but I didn't hear the lead up to the whole cesarean. So if you're happy to share your stories, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, I didn't actually have a cesarean.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I stand corrected. You see, it was very quick. I thought
Um,
we were all up there because you'd had HBACs,
I
but
think a lot of the other panel members of the panel were, but I was there, having had a free birth after quite a traumatic hospital birth, with obstetric violence.
yeah, I remember you said that, and that is a thing, isn't it? Obstetric violence is a word. It's an expression we hear. But what does I mean without obviously bringing everything back up to to the
Yeah.
surface? I know you've done a lot of work around it, but you, for the benefit of the listeners, how go into as much detail as you're prepared to share,
Yeah,
please.
I think it can trigger a lot of people. I don't think they like to maybe use the term, but I do. I think it's important that we use it. Um, so obstetric violence is violence at the hand of um, obstetricians or maternity medical staff, and that can be physical
Mm-hmm.
or it can be um, mental, psychological. So it can be really strong coercion or bullying, um, or it can be, I guess, treatments performed on the birther without their consent. Um, and in my case, it was both. Yeah.
Oh, bless you. I'm so sorry. This was with your first child, was it?
Yes, yeah. So nearly 4 years ago now, um, and I Uh, loved being pregnant and I loved all things birth and I became a complete nerd for it and I loved learning about it and I was um, I guess laughed at a little bit at expectant mum groups because I was excited about the birth. I was really excited about the whole concept, the whole thing. I wasn't worried about the pain. I was excited. But it just did not go the way that I hoped. And I think anytime I kind of exercised any of the knowledge that I learned to make a decision, I almost got twice as much pushback.
Wow.
Yeah.
You said you were excited about the birth. Can you just before we go into the horrors, can you just tell people because I think a lot of people would be quite surprised at that language. So what, as your first child, what was so exciting to you?
I When I was pregnant, I can't even describe it very well. I felt more comfortable in my own skin than I ever have. I suddenly wasn't looking in the mirror and judging all the lumps and bumps and whatever. I just thought I looked great and I felt confident. And whenever I thought about the birth, I just thought about meeting this person that we'd created and that I would do this challenging thing, but that would be the reward. And I guess I almost was looking at it like a marathon or something like that, like a physical challenge that I was made for, but would have this amazing result.
Which I think is actually quite a reasonable way of looking at birth and pregnancy, isn't it? Or pregnancy and birth. It's it's not a pathology. You are made to do it, and it's a very beautiful thing. If a little bit of hard work, or quite a lot of hard work, really, especially a first birth.
Yeah, and I do. That's it. I didn't think of it as pathological, and I think obviously there were nerves there. Will I deal with it well? Like, how long will it be? What will, you know, but not unlike you would have if you were preparing for a big challenging sporting event or
Hmm.
something. Um,
I
yeah, and
guess
I was really,
the time thing is a bit more of a question with labour, isn't it?
yes, yeah, I think because I think that's quite a common nerve, right? If you know that you can handle this thing, you can manage it, but you don't know if you're managing it for days, hours, and that I think can be the thing that worries a lot of people. And there's the affirmations, aren't there? Like I can do anything for a minute and all of that, but it's trying to remember that without thinking like
Yeah.
forward. I'm quite a forward thinking person. So the nerves were there, but I was confident. I was excited.
And did you know what you were having? Did you have a scan to sex your baby? No.
No, no, we left it a surprise. I wanted to find out, and my husband didn't. And we kind of thought, well, we can't unfind out, so let's just wait and let's just wait. And we ended up waiting the whole time. And the plan was that my husband would reveal what we had, and he did do that despite all the horrors. We just still get that. Mm.
Good. So what happened? You're having a bonny pregnancy. Everybody's healthy. All the checkups are going well.
Yeah, yeah. In hindsight, there was some, I guess, coercion and poor care in the pregnancy, but I didn't, I guess, realize at the time.
Mhm.
There was a lot of, oh, just hop up on the bed without explaining what's going to happen. Um, and I remember having bloods taken very early on, and the needle was in my arm
And
um,
so you're in labour now.
in pregnancy.
Oh, during pregnancy they
Yeah.
took blood without telling you they were going to take.
Um, they said they were going to take blood, but I didn't know what it was for. I didn't know that I could say no. Um, and I remember the needle being in my arm and them saying, "Oh, your dad's diabetic, isn't he? I better take more," without me knowing why. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. And only after my labour, which we'll obviously get to in a minute, did I think actually that was a bit off as well.
Yeah.
I later on in my pregnancy, um, I saw a different midwife, very common story. Saw a different midwife who did the fundal height measurement when they measure your bump. She measured it slightly different than my normal midwife. And oh, we won't think anything of it because it's just one strange measurement. Then when I saw my midwife again, it looked like it had shot back up, like dipped and shot up. So then they sent me for a growth scan, which I was like, I don't think I need to. I can decline this, can't I? And they made out like I couldn't. Um, so I went for a growth scan, took time off work, got really stressed, thought something was wrong. Nothing wrong. It's just a poor measurement. Um, and yeah, at the time, it didn't seem like a big deal. But I think after my labour, looking back, it
Mm.
did. And that really informed what I did with my second pregnancy, which we'll get on to.
So how pregnant were you when you got this anomalous measurement?
That was quite a way through, sort of 30 something weeks, I think. Um, and it was purely because I'd seen the same midwife, then one different one.
Mm.
Really common story. I hear lots of women talk about that. And the fundal height measurements aren't accurate anyway, really. But
But
um,
neither are the growth scans, are they?
no, they're not that late on. Absolutely not. No. And I remember telling someone that on the phone. I said, I'm not going to go this growth scan, I don't think, because they measured my fundal height on a Friday afternoon. So I knew I'd have to wait all weekend to hear about this appointment. And I said, I called up just after and said, like, I'm not going to go. I don't need to. Like, I don't think it's accurate. But then they made me feel like I would be hurting my baby if I didn't. And as a first time mum, you can have all the knowledge in the world.
Mm.
But that fear, if that fear like card is used, that is going to eat away at you. So I did go, and it was a waste of time. Um,
Of course. And there's a thing at the end of pregnancy, so you're quite late on in the pregnancy now.
yeah,
Particular hormone, I can never remember the name of it. It's a stress hormone basically, and it rises up. It is not adrenaline or cortisol. It's something to do with cortisol.
yeah,
I edit it in when I do go back and put it in. Um, it is it in well, it increases a woman's perception of threat. So it doesn't increase
yeah.
actual threat, it increases the perception of threat, which is a
Right,
really
hypervigilant.
important difference, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and because you're wired to do anything you can to protect that baby.
Exactly.
So as soon as the medical professionals start talking about your decision being a danger to the baby, it does not matter how much you know that isn't true. It's so hard to fight it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they almost imply that they're not going to look after you if you don't go along with what they're. That's certainly what I experienced with an induction with my first child was
Yeah,
only do as we tell you, or
there is a kind of, I guess, a standoffishness sometimes. And I get it. I get where it comes from, that it comes from this fear of them not following their own guidelines that they have to follow. I understand, but it doesn't make it harder to deal with.
no, no, absolutely not. So the blood, the blood is very weird. Just
Yes. And
random
again,
blood.
I didn't think anything about it. I knew they were taking bloods, but I didn't know what for.
Mhm.
Um, and then, yeah, when it was that they were taking them already, and yeah, they just said, "Oh, your dad's diabetic. Oh, I need another vial." And then they sort of opened a drawer behind them and got another vial. And I was thinking, why? But that was very early on in pregnancy, and I just at that point I hadn't done much learning, and I didn't know. At that point, I still was very much under the impression, I think, that whatever they're saying and doing is the absolute best thing for me and my
Mm.
baby. Not that there might be outdated guidelines or that actually we're in a bit of a maternity crisis. I didn't know any of that then. And I learned it throughout my pregnancy, and I became, I guess, more cynical as I went through. But it wasn't until my labor and after that I really kind of switched the way I was thinking.
Mhm. So just a quick one about the guidelines and protocols. Do you know? I'm sure you do, but maybe not all of our listeners do know that only 9% of guidelines and protocols are backed by evidence-based research.
Yeah.
8%. That leaves what, another 91 that aren't.
Yeah. And even with like evidence being able to be manipulated, I guess, like the recent big baby trial, which basically said that we didn't need to intervene with big babies, um, was stopped early and then like manipulated to make it look like maybe we did,
Yeah.
but actually we don't. Um,
But
yeah,
they've been at that for absolutely years. Marjorie Chew wrote a book called Safer Childbirth, and there was a big thing. It was around about the time of John Peel, Peel, Sir John Peel, who got everybody in hospitals.
yeah,
And there was a big chunk of information in a very deep research paper that they just ignored, which was basically it's safer at home.
yeah.
But they just left that bit out. Crazy. One wonders why.
And I think it's happening again now. I in the obviously with all the reviews into maternity care right now, um, the media, the way they're reporting on it, which is how I guess most people get their information, they're not reading. I mean, they might not be like me, and they're not reading the studies because they want to know more. Um, Most people are getting information from the media, and the headlines are, women dies in home birth,
Yeah,
but we don't get women dies in hospital birth.
yeah.
We just get the one isolated incident there, which makes it seem like there's this bias towards making us think a certain thing, which we know isn't true. Yeah.
Well, I do think that the media is responsible for quite a lot. And you can see that the messaging is just, it seems to match an agenda.
Yes. Yeah.
So you had this rather strange, slightly disempowering. Is that a reasonable
Yeah.
assessment of your pregnancy?
Yeah.
You go into labour spontaneously.
Yes. So I went into labor at 40 weeks and 5 days, the average.
No
Um,
mention of induction. They didn't try and stretch and sweep you.
no, I did actually tell my midwife very early on, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want it. And did get to the sort of 40-week mark, and she went, "You said you didn't want that, so I won't talk about it." Yeah, yeah,
Well
that
done, midwife.
good. Yeah. Um, so yeah, 40 plus 5. I woke up with sort of twinges, and I thought, well, maybe and sort of laid in bed for a bit, and they ramped up fairly quickly. Um, and so my husband called the hospital, and we were told in pregnancy to call the hospital early, even though I didn't think I needed to go in at that point, because I really, really wanted a water birth. Um, I'm an anxious person. So we'd had a tour of the hospital, even though they weren't offering those at the time because it was 2022. So it was just sort of post COVID. Um, so they'd said, ring up and just give us the heads up. And also, I couldn't wear the face masks, the COVID masks, because I've had surgery and I've got a hearing thing. Um, and so they said again, we can have the heads up about that because it was kind of on the borderline as to whether they were making people wear them at that point.
Hmm.
And for me, they weren't making women in labour wear them, but if my husband did, I couldn't hear him. I need to see his mouth.
Yeah.
Um, So we did that. We called the hospital, and there was no answer, and it just kept ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing, and it was the sign of things to come. Um, my husband called them, like called, hung up, like for the best part of half an hour, and that phone rang and rang and rang and rang and rang. It was 7:30 in the morning, bit later than that now. Um, And he went, you know what, I'm going to put the bags in the car and stuff anyway, because we're pretty sure it's happening today. And I went, okay, I'm going to go run a bath. So I went to run a bath. And I said, well, while I'm running the bath, I'll try and ring them. And yeah, they picked up when I called them.
Of course.
Um, and by this point, obviously it's been half an hour of them not picking up. And we don't think we need to go in yet, but we're quite worried why the phone line's not working. And we triple checked the number. And so they pick up and I went, oh, I was quite surprised and stuff. I think I'm having a baby. I don't think I need to come in yet, but we were told to call, blah, blah, blah. I tried to start explaining it. And they went, well, we think you might need to come in now. Obviously, I'm sounding quite stressed, I think, because of all the, you know. Um, and I think I repeated, I don't think I need to at the moment. I'm running a bath, I feel okay. But they said, no, no, come in and be checked. So I sort of told my husband this, passed the phone back over to him. He told them everything about the mask and the water birth. We got in the car and we drove in. Um, and I was like put in this room that was like a cupboard. There were like chairs and stuff stacked up everywhere. It was very odd. Um, yeah. And I was in there for a long time. Um, and I thought they'd forgotten about me. And I kind of didn't know why I was here at this point. Like I knew it was early, but they were getting quicker. Um,
The contractions were getting quicker.
yeah. Yes. You read about early labor and people say, oh yeah, I just sort of potted around for a bit. And there wasn't any of that. It was definitely becoming regular. Um, and yeah, so when someone came in, um, my husband sort of reminded them, we spoke on the phone. She really wants to use water. You said on the phone that was fine because I going back a bit, they did. They said, yeah, 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 that's not a problem. There's no one in at the moment, like yeah. Um, and they went, oh no, 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 all our pools are out of action. They've been out of action for ages. And we were both like, why didn't you tell us that on the phone? And we did. It was me you spoke to, was what the midwife said. It was me you spoke to. You did tell us that on the phone. We did tell you that. And we were both very confused. But you didn't. And they were like, well, it doesn't matter now, you're here. And I said, okay, well, I'm in early labor. Like, you haven't admitted me. I'm fine. I think I might go and present at a different hospital. I want to use water. I didn't know you had a problem. But no, you can't now, you're here.
Wow.
And I suddenly felt like I was in prison. Like, it was odd. And
Can you say those words again? Because I think that's really worth hearing. I suddenly felt like I was in prison.
yeah, I did. I suddenly felt like I was in prison. They didn't, said I couldn't leave. And I couldn't present it at a different hospital. Um, and we'd called them as we were advised, obviously to say, we really want to use water. Like that water is my pain relief anyway. If I've got a headache, I'll go in the bath before I take a painkiller. Like that's the way I would always. If I'm a really stressful day, I will go in the bath. Um, and the fact that we'd said it on the phone and they were like, yeah, yeah, no problem, not a problem at all. But they said they had legionnaires in their water and they couldn't use the pools and they'd known about it for weeks. And Um, and in hindsight, actually, after my labor, the day after my labor, a post on their social media popped up, my local hospital, saying we have pools available to use. And it was posted a day before, but they'd been shut down for weeks. So it was really just poor kind of, I guess, communication on their part. Um, but we were there. So I was happy to be examined. I had put that on my birth plan. I'm someone who likes knowledge. I like to know. I wanted to know that I'm doing this okay. I knew that it didn't really matter if I was 4 centimeters or 10, it wouldn't tell me how long it was going to be, but at least I knew that things were progressing. So I said I'd be examined. They examined me. They said I was 2 centimeters, and they said that they thought my waters had gone. And I said, okay, well, I'm okay with that. I've got no signs of infection. I know what I'm looking for. If they have gone, I've not been aware of it. So it's not an extortionate amount. I'm fine. Let's just see what happens. And they also said, and we think you may have mild meconium, but we don't know. It could just be the color of your sort of waters and fluids, but it might be meconium. Um, and again, I said, okay, well, if it's mild enough that you're not sure, I'm okay with that. And I'd read the guidance and I'd read Rachel Reed's amazing article, The Curse of Meconium Stained Liquor, which um, made me feel confident that if they weren't sure, it probably wasn't going to be an issue as
Yeah.
long as we didn't interfere and cause baby to be stressed. But they didn't like that. So this midwife who already seemed quite annoyed by the fact that we'd said no one had answered the phone, and by the fact that we'd said that we'd spoke about the pool and stuff, um, sort of went off to go and get someone else, and a doctor came in and they said, well, we want to augment your labour, like, because we think there might be meconium, we think your waters have gone and we don't know when they've gone. And I said, no, I'm fine. And then they kept going and they kept talking about it. They kept talking about why they need it, why they want it, why they want it. I said, no, I said, no, like, I don't feel I need that. It was like they couldn't hear me. They just kept going. Um, and then they wanted to monitor me. And I said, I asked questions. I asked, what's this for? They want to check the baby was okay. And I said, I don't want to be strapped to a monitor permanently. Like, what is the parameters? What are you looking for? They said, we need 20 minutes of a good heartbeat.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm still in this room with chairs and stuff all over the place. Like, yeah. So I was like, right, okay. And I obviously deeply regret some of the things I agreed to, but I didn't give them consent because saying no 3, 4 times and then going, oh, fine, okay, it's not consent.
That's not consent. That's coercion.
So they put me on the monitor. They got their reading. It's fine. Nothing wrong. Brilliant. So I'm 2 centimeters. You've got what you want. I'm going home. And they stood in the doorway and I couldn't get past.
They stood in the doorway.
Yeah,
So back to your prison feeling.
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh my,
They
what?
stood in the doorway telling me that I needed to stay because they needed to keep my baby safe. And I questioned and asked, and I said, what inkling have you got there's a problem? And they had none, but they wouldn't leave. And they were talking about, well, what you're going to do when you get home. I said, I'm going to go in the bath. So, oh, you can have a bath here. The baths are fine, but the pools aren't fine. It's a different way, like different water supply. And then there was two of them, doctor, midwife. I can't remember which one said that, but one of them said, oh, you can have a bath, that's fine. And the other one interrupted and said, we don't have a bath on this ward. And they argued between themselves for a good few minutes about whether they had a bath or not. And my husband and I are looking at each other thinking, they're meant to be caring for us. They don't
Yeah.
know what they're doing.
They
Um,
don't, they don't even know the layout of their hospital.
no, in the end, I interrupted, and I think it made them hate me more because I felt like they hated me, like because I just kept questioning everything. But I interrupted because we'd had a tour of the hospital because I'm an anxious person. So I interrupted when you've got two baths, and I don't really like that. Um, and they were like, let's just show you. We're just going to show you to the shower because we don't know if we've got a bath. So we're just going to show you to a shower. And how about you can try using the shower on your bump and stuff, and then you can stay. And if you're comfortable, you can stay. And if you're not comfortable, then you can go home. So I'm like, okay, because at least they're going to move out the door. So I follow them down this corridor and I meet a very nice midwife. And they said to her, this is Shannon. She's only 2 centimeters, blah, blah, blah. They explained everything they want to explain. And they said, we said that she can use a shower because the pools are out of action. And the midwife went, would you not prefer a bath? There's one there,
Wow.
which is laughable now. So she ran me a bath, got in the bath, and my husband described it as like instant relief. He was like, the contraction pain went, said you calm down. It was like instant, just because I was in a room, I could lock the door. It's just me and my husband. I was in water. It was like,
Your oxytocin could flow.
yeah, exactly that. Like, and it was like he said he could see it.
Mm.
Um, and the midwife who had suggested the bath, um, I don't remember her name, but she she came in. My husband had been giving out birth plans as they were like wedding favors, handing them to everyone. Most of them were put on a surface, the nearest surface, and not looked at. But this midwife, she came in and she said, "I read your birth plan." She's like, "I know you want the pool, but at least you've got the bath, and let's try and make as much of it happen as I can." So I'm going to do everything I can to make sure a doctor doesn't need to see you, which was telling in itself, I think. Um, and I liked her. Um, and I think she offered to examine me again. She did it in the bath.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a few hours. In my head, it had been 10 minutes, but it's been a few hours. My husband sort of filled me in on the timings.
Mm.
But we hadn't been there that long. Um, and I was now 6 centimeters, which the midwife informed me was a brilliant progression. She was like, faster than we were expecting. They want the 1 centimeter per hour, but you've gone further than that. And by this point, you're in what we would call active labor. We would want you to stay at this point.
Yeah.
I'm feeling great. I'm like, brilliant. I could just stay in this bath, just enjoy it in this bath. Like it's the best case scenario. Um, but then midwife come back in and she said they want to monitor the baby again. And I said, I'm not getting out the bath. And she said, okay, we can put wireless monitors on, but we've got wireless ones. And it's the same as before. We'll get the nice heartbeat trace and then we'll go. Like, I just want to stay in the bath. So she went off to get the wireless monitors. She attaches them. Um, Again, my knowledge at this point of CTG monitoring, not as good as it is now. Now I
Mm.
know, pretty much a waste of time.
Yeah.
Back then,
Now, get
yeah,
out of the room.
yeah. Um, So she came in, she put the monitors on, and she explained that the machine that picks up the trace is outside. In my head, I'm like, great, they'll be outside. She went outside, she's out for a bit, she came back in, she sat on the edge of the bar, and she said, I'm really sorry, we can't find a heartbeat.
What?
Um, like there was just a moment of silence, and then she looked at the monitor and went, oh, no, they're not charged. And
Oh my God.
yeah, again, reiterating, we felt like we were in prison and now we felt like we're in a circus. It just felt like nobody here knows what they're doing. And now my kind midwife that I was beginning to trust,
Yeah.
I also don't know whether to trust. And yes, okay, it's not her fault if it's not been charged, but like
You
check
don't
first.
you don't come in and tell a woman in, oh my God.
Yeah. Um, and that is probably one of the least worrying things about what happened. But that's the thing that when I tell my birth story, it often shocks people because it's such a stupid thing that didn't need to happen. Like I didn't need like my heart to drop. I
Yeah.
didn't need that. It's such a preventable thing.
And everything about you capitulating is
Yeah,
because you want to keep your baby safe, as they say, because baby's
yeah.
not safe. Oh my God, Shannon, that is horrendous.
I know. Um, yeah. So they put the wireless monitors on. Um, I'm cold in this bath now, so I asked my husband to run more hot, um, which we do. Uh, and then they're worried about my temperature. But obviously, I'm half in a bath and half out. It's like a birth pool where you can kind of be in. Like I can get my bump under and then nothing else is, or I can, yeah. So I said, I'm not, my temperature's fine. I've just put more hot in the bath. Um, and then the wireless monitors aren't good enough.
They're hopeless.
They want me out on a wired one.
Oh,
So, it's the usual story. It's this whole cascade. I actually remember saying to the midwife, I don't want this whole cascade of intervention. And she went, that's not a real thing. It's like, it's exactly what's
hello.
happening. But yeah, my husband, um, again, similar to me, he learned everything I had, but was, I guess, naive at the time. And he was still kind of in the impression that they know what's best. And he deeply regrets this now. And actually, when we get to my second birth experience, he's a different person. But he was there kind of when they suggest something and I decline. When they suggested it again and again, he was often the first to kind of relent, which is understandable because they're telling him effectively that his whole family are in danger, like me and the baby. Um,
Yeah.
and so,
And I think also men struggle with just the weight, they just do nothing. It's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
particularly difficult for men because they're solutions based, right? They like to get something, get it sorted, get it done.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the whole culture in hospitals in general. I think is the
Yeah.
whole kind of it's better if we do something and something goes wrong than if we don't do something and it went wrong because maybe we could have prevented it. Um, but so I agreed to get out the bath, but I want as much oxytocin as possible. And I said I'm not getting out the bath until I can have a birth ball. I don't want to be on that bed, and I'm quite demanding.
Mm.
And so I got out of the bath. And I walked into a room, and to be fair, between my husband and the midwife, they'd done it. This room was dark. They blocked out the windows. It was dark. It had a birth ball. It had candles. It was nicer. And now being out of the bath, we could have birth snacks. So I was happily bouncing on a ball in Milky Bar. Um, and then they come in and they want to put the monitors on, and they put the monitors on, and they put the thing on your finger that gets kind of your sats.
That's actually quite unpleasant and quite
Yeah,
uncomfortable.
I got told by my hypnobirthing instructor that you will have no idea what you'll feel comfortable with in labor. And she described that she, bought a lovely bikini for the pool, but absolutely just had to be naked. And I thought, oh, I won't be like that. They put this SATS monitor on me, and it was like someone was like stabbing me. It was the most irritating thing. Every time they left the room, I ripped that thing off. I was like, I don't want it on my finger. For some reason, that was the most irritating thing to me. And I'm all these monitors on me, but that thing, I just hated it. Um, and then of course they kept coming in to put it back on. We need to know your readings and the baby's readings. We need to know this. Um, and at one point I asked them, "What's this for? Are you worried about my baby?" And they said, "No, but we need it for our paperwork."
That says it all.
Yeah. Um, and I think they got a bit of a sarcastic comment as to, "Oh, so I'm this uncomfortable just so your paperwork looks good." Um,
Well done.
and uh yeah, I don't think I was doing this. Like I said, every time I felt like I pushed back, I felt like I was making them more irate. Um, but and I actually cared at that point. I don't know why, but I didn't want them to dislike me. I think I felt like vulnerable.
You
Um,
want on your side. You are vulnerable. You
yeah,
absolutely want these people rooting for you, don't? Yeah, whatever they, whoever they are, You do want your team. You want Team Shannon. You want people to help you through this.
Yeah, which I now know it should be. Um, and so yeah, I'm on the birth ball with this monitor on for a certain amount of time, and they are now asking for the fetal scalp electrode, which I have seen pictures of. I showed my husband pictures of, and they did the whole it's a clip. I said it's not a clip, it's a barb, and it goes under the skin. And no, it doesn't. It's a clip. And I think again, sarcastic remark. I said I can show you a picture of one if you want. Um,
Well,
and they
why don't you show it to me before you put it on my baby's head?
and I said no, and they gave up for a bit, and they were trying to explain the monitors weren't picking up the trace, and I said yeah because of this, and I moved backwards on the ball, and you heard the monitor drop, and I moved forwards, and you heard it pick up, and I said it's to do with me moving, and no, I'm not going to lie still because you do your paperwork. There's nothing wrong. You can see there's nothing wrong. Um, like it's too much of a coincidence that my baby's heart rate would drop every time I move this way slightly and then pick up immediately when I move that way slightly. That's the monitor. It's not, it's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Um, but they were relentless. I must have said no to the fetal scalp electrode about 7 or 8 times. And we have my birth notes. I've never read them. I've never wanted to, but my husband did because we made a complaint afterwards and he combed through them. And he said there were these stickers that said what they'd requested and it said consent given, yes or no. And they are so many of them that say no until the end of my labor when they stop putting them in. Um, I must have said no to the fetal scalp electrode, like, yeah, 7 or 8 times. And by this point, even them asking is a waste of time. It's never going to be consent if I say yes after the 8th time.
No.
Um, but they wouldn't stop. They examined me again, and this is where it starts to get fuzzy for me. Um, I know the sort of big moments, but not all of it. So they examined me again, 9.5 centimeters, and I'm like, yeah, I've done this, and I've done this fighting all of you. Um,
And did the baby have? Did your baby have the electrode on the scalp?
Not at this point, but
Okay.
eventually, yes. Um, yeah, 9.5 centimeters. And they say, oh, we can break your waters.
Why?
Yeah, but they did. Um, that I really do regret. I think I had a bit of I'm so close to the end.
Yeah.
And do you know what? Maybe it might make a difference. Um, and like I said, I'm a bit fuzzy. I don't remember if I think it was during the exam that they said 9 centimeters or 9.5 that they broke my waters. I think I don't remember. I know we had one exam at 2, one exam at 6, and then it was like straight up to 9. I know they kept pointing out how quickly it was progressing in a good way. So they broke my waters and there was thicker meconium. But by this point, 9.5, no signs of stress in baby. But yeah, they want to put that on. They still talk about the fetal scalp electrode. Um, and a doctor comes in. Well, actually, for a little bit, I laboured without all the rubbish on. But then they're still asking about the fetal scalp electrode. And I think um, they were also asking me to go to the toilet. They kept talking about me needing to go for a wee because it could block baby, which I knew.
Mm.
I'm a teacher and we're notorious for holding it all day. And yeah, even 9 months pregnant teaching, I could go all day. So I'm trying to go. And they were talking about fitting a catheter. Um, and I thought, I just don't need to go. And they were talking about fitting a catheter. And then one of the midwives suggested an in-out catheter. And at this point, I'm bargaining. So I agreed to the in-out catheter if they shut up about the fetal scalp electrode. So they do that, get nothing out because I don't need to go. Um, and then they're still on it. So uh, they put that electrode in. Um, I don't remember how or why I agreed to it. I just was broken down.
Mm.
Um, and then they want to put in a proper catheter because the in and out catheter didn't get anything out. So that's in too. So at this point, I've got wires coming out of me, and very much like the SATs thing on my finger, that they were so irritating. Like I found sort of a position comfortable on the bed, like leaning over the back on my knees. And at this point, it's really ramping up. And I was talking to my husband and reminding him what transition would look like. I was like, I might say I can't do it. Like, um, and I was making quite a lot of noise. And I remember turning to the midwife, and they were changing shifts now. And the midwife that I'd had originally said, I reckon we're going to meet the baby. I'm going to stay a bit. And so there were two. Um, and I was apologizing for making noise. And I remember them saying, oh, love, we can hear someone at the desk. Like, you make as much noise as you want. Like, you're fine. We can't. Like, it's good. And they were pointing out the rhombus of my callus. They were saying they thought they could see that. And then I'm going to meet a baby soon. And I was like, oh, I've heard about that. That's so cool. Um, and yeah, then the doctor came in.
Then what?
A doctor came in
Oh,
and said, I just want to talk to you. So I move and I sit on the edge of the bed. And she said, have you thought about having epidural?
at 9.5 centimeters.
That was exactly what I said. At 9.5 centimeters. And I went, no, thank you. I'm okay. Um,
I've
is it
done
because
it.
I was making
I'm ready.
noise? I said, is it because I was making noise? I'm sorry. They said it was all right. And she was like, no, no, we just think they might be more comfortable if you had an epidural. Um, and then I'm hyper focused on this doctor, and I turn to my left, and there's other people in the room, like other doctors and other midwives, and and they're all like filling in paperwork and stuff, and they were saying, "Oh, my wife had one. Oh, I had an epidural. You don't get a gold star for not having one." And I was like, "This is really odd. It's really odd." I said, "Is there a reason I need one?" And they said, "No, we just think you'd be more comfortable with one." And one of these other people passed the doctor who was talking to me a leaflet about epidural, which she passed to my husband and said, why don't you read this and have a chat about it? And then she sat down and
Oh,
didn't leave. And my husband and I were like, um, okay. And he quite hilariously threw it on the floor, the leaflet. And they just kept going. You'd really be more comfortable with that one. But do you know what we'll do? We're going to get an anaesthetist to come and talk to you about one. And then they left. And I was like, really confused. And I was quite upset by this point. Like, I was getting upset. And the anaesthetist came in and he went, I heard you want an epidural. I said, no, I don't. And he went, oh, I don't want you to have one if you don't want it. And I said, they made me talk to you. I don't want it. And the people are slowly filing back in the room. And I still, to this day, don't know who they were and why there were so many people in the room. And they were saying nothing was wrong. And so the anaesthetist says, well, I can talk to you about it if you want. I said, okay, go on. Talk to me about it. So he started talking about it. And he went, do you feel you need one? And I remember saying, well, I'm 9.5 centimeters dilating and having a full-blown conversation with you. So no, I don't think.
good answer.
Um, and actually, this anaesthetist was the only person who, when I had a contraction, stopped talking to me and said, I'll wait. It was the
Everybody else.
only person. Everyone else just blew through their conversation like the whole time. And my husband and I, we had a code word that if I wanted to change my birth plan, and he said to me, do you want this? And I said the code word. He went, are you sure? He was shocked. I said, yes, I'll have the epidural. And I said, I just need it to stop. And my husband took that as the pain. But I absolutely meant I just want all these people to leave me alone. And that I had been constantly asked for things and I said no. And at this point, I've been asked 7 or 8 times about the electrode. I've been asked multiple times about the monitoring, and saying no didn't work. It didn't get them to stop.
Mm.
Um, so I took the epidural and I cried my eyes out the entire time, and I was shaking my head. Um, and clearly, I think anybody with an ounce of empathy or anybody who'd met a human before could see that I was doing this under duress, like literally hysterical tears, shaking my head. Don't want this.
Oh, Shannon, this is horrible.
Sorry.
No,
It is.
it's fine. I mean, it's important that it's talked about, but it's just,
Yeah. It was one thing after the other.
oh,
And when the epidural went in, everybody left. And I'd argued that I need a peanut ball. I want to kind of still try and be open and encourage labor. I knew that women, not all women, dilate to 10 centimeters. Like baby could be coming any minute, but they just seem to, yeah. So I laid on the bed with this peanut ball. Oh, and I'd also said I'd heard about a walking epidural, and I don't want to lay down. I want to keep moving. They were like, you absolutely will be able to. And as soon as they'd done it, they went, no, you can't get off bed. And it was strong. I could not feel anything. And in a conversation I had recently in my second pregnancy, um, a consultant midwife thought that maybe they'd given a spinal because my description of the epidural was not what she would expect. Like I said, no, like I could not move and I could not feel anything from way down. And at this point, everything stopped. Understandably, because I've been bullied for nearly the best part of an entire day. There's no oxytocin.
mm,
Um, I've been poked and prodded, told multiple times my baby might die when nothing was wrong. Um, and given an epidural where I couldn't work with my body and I couldn't do anything. So everything stopped. When they examined me again, I was 9.5 centimeters still. There was some mention of an anterior cervical lip, which is slightly a whole load of rubbish. Um, and this new doctor came in and she said, I think we need to go for a C-section. And I said, no. And she turned to my husband and she said, you need to advocate for your wife. She needs to go for a C-section.
hey, hang on a
And,
minute. Advocate for your wife who's just refused a C-section.
yeah, and go him. He said, I
That's,
am. She said, no. And then she sat down on the edge of my bed. And I questioned this next part so much. I went through therapy, I questioned it. I asked my husband hundreds of times, and he was like, no, you are remembering it correctly. She sat down on the edge of the bed and she said, I'm pregnant too. I wouldn't kill my baby. Why are you trying to do it to yours?
no.
And I was just in hysterical tears. And then my heart rate drops, baby's heart rate drops, big red buttons pressed. And understandably so, because I could not be more stressed. And I still said, no, 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 not C-section. I'm not doing it. No. And she said, we'll go into theatre. We'll try vaginally. But if it doesn't work, we're doing a C-section. They gave my husband scrubs to put on and they wheeled me out of the room. And while they're wheeling me out of the room, I'm like, I don't want to have killed the baby. I don't want to have killed the baby because she used that phrase.
Mm.
And um, she said, I'm going to cut you. And that was how it was worded. And I said, no, I don't want that. I don't need that. I don't want that. So I have to. And then, and on my own at this point, because my husband's getting changed and I'm trying to get off the bed, but I can't move. And we go into theatre and they top up the epidural because they might need to do a C-section. And they get baby out with forceps. And the word forceps was never mentioned. So they couldn't have been consented to. There was an implication, I guess they thought, but they just told me vaginally. They performed an episiotomy, even though I'd said no. And I'd screamed no. And I tried to get off the bed and I'd actually tried to push her away from me. Um, and then baby was here. And I thought it'd stop, but it didn't stop. They put baby on my tummy for a little bit. And my husband said, it's a boy and he's got massive bollocks. Sorry if I can't swear.
It's fine.
But
She said bollocks. I didn't catch that.
um and they put him on my sort of tummy, and then they took him, and I'd said that I wanted him on me, and they said that'd be fine, but they took him, they wiped him down, they wrapped him up, they whacked a hat on him, and then they handed him to my husband. And I was like, I need him, I need him on me, I need him on me. And they went, no, no, no. And they stopped my husband from giving him to me. And they said, no, no, you're shaking. So no. Um, and they wouldn't let me hold him.
You were shaking because you wanted your baby, probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
The thing that would have saved
Um,
you would have been to hold him.
yeah. And uh they then went to put the injection in for the placenta to come. And I'd not wanted that. And I said no. And I remember grabbing his arm and just got pushed off. And they did it anyway. And then the placenta came. I didn't see it, didn't know anything about it. They obviously stitched me up and everything, and they wheeled me into recovery. I've still not held my baby. Um, and when I got into recovery, my husband handed him to me straight away, and I like whipped the blanket off of him and the hat and everything. I just put him on me and immediately stopped shaking. Like immediately. Um, and at this point, I could not, I mean, I got photos, I could not look or feel or felt more broken. I had, you know, bits where they tried to inject stuff that at one point they tried to put something in here in case they need to do,
Oh, the cannula, the
yeah,
evil cannula. Oh my God, I hate those things.
yeah, but they had a student do it. So she tried like so many times. My entire arm was black from bruising. The bath, the cleaner they'd used, had obviously given me a rash because the entire side of me that was laid on the bath was like red. It like had hives. Um, and I was just broken. And then someone comes in and went, we were meant to do a COVID test when we admitted you, but we forgot. So we're going to do it now. And I was like, I've been here since 8 in the morning, and it's now, he was born at quarter to midnight. It's like, I think the ship sailed, isn't it? And they were like, no, we've got to do it. I said, okay, what happens if I've got COVID then? Can I go home? That's all I want. And they went, no, 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 no. If you've got COVID, you will admit you and the baby, but your husband can't stay with you. I said, that's mad. um,
Well, yeah.
yeah, that was half an hour of arguing. They still did it. They never told me the result. My husband went for a wee a bit later and said, oh, they wrote on the board the COVID test negative. Um, and uh, it was just, yeah. And then they wheeled us into a room. Um, I think like the people in this recovery room clearly had started to notice that had been through some ordeal, because my husband should have gone home at this point. It was outside of their hours, but they said he could stay. And rather than taking me to a postnatal ward, they took me to a room um, that is for birthing mothers. I think first they took me back to the room that I laboured in, and it was really triggering. And then they took me to another room that was on their like midwife led unit, which was meant to be for like calm births that clearly they weren't using because they put us in this room. And about 4 in the morning, a new midwife came on shift, and I said, I want to leave. Like, I need to leave. And she said, I'll start putting things in place for that to happen. And the day after, they were doing like monitoring on baby constantly every few hours. And I think it got to about midday. And I was like, I'm done. Is there something wrong with the baby? And they said, no. But we would normally keep you a bit longer because you've had, an episiotomy and this, and there was meconium. So we want to check baby. And at that point, I think I found the last ounce of strength anywhere within me. And I said, so is there nothing wrong with the baby? They said, no. And I said, what should I be looking for? And they said, what the signs of infection were. And I said, right, I am leaving. So if you want me to sign some sort of discharge papers. You bring them because I'm walking out of here in the next 10 minutes. So they brought me papers, which I signed, and then we left. And there's a picture of me at home on the sofa cuddling my baby boy. And you can just see this kind of relief
Mm.
that I was out of there. Um, yeah. And a midwife still turned up, crack a dawn the morning afterwards because I discharged myself. Um, but yeah, it was an ordeal.
That's such an unfortunate word to use about birth, isn't it? It was an ordeal. I mean,
Absolutely.
it should not be an ordeal.
Yeah. And it left me questioning absolutely everything. I thought I was a bad mum already. I was bonded with my son because I wanted to cuddle him all the time. But I was absolutely terrified that I didn't get that golden hour and that something would be up. Um, Breastfeeding became the most important thing in the world to me. Um, and I fed him for 2 years. Um,
It,
yeah, despite the worst advice from a health visitor at 4 weeks who said, "I it's easier just to give formula." Um, yeah, she also told me to let him stay at grandparents overnight because I clearly need a rest. Um, yeah. But by that point, I was done. I thought these people do not know what they're doing. So I opted out of the health visiting service. I trained as a breastfeeding peer supporter, and I supported myself.
you did that training whilst.
Towards the end of my breastfeeding, yeah. I sort of used things like the breastfeeding helpline and stuff like that. And we had some local groups run by peer supporters. And my son, he had some horrific reflux thing that they tried to medicate, but clearly was because of tension in birth that I didn't know at the time. But so he threw up everything. He didn't gain weight well. He never lost it, but he didn't gain it at the speed they wanted. Um, but I still believe that that was the best thing for him. So yeah, I continued to breastfeed him. And he actually didn't grow out of his reflux thing even when he was on solids. He was about 9, 10 months before he stopped throwing everything up. Um, and then around then, yeah, I signed up to train to be a breastfeeding supporter, and I did the training to kind of get my own answers, I think, but also because I think it was so needed. If there was people out there giving advice like, "Oh, don't bother with it; it's a waste of time. Just do formula."
Horrendous.
Yeah,
God,
it.
really interesting what you say. This little that she's my first, and she was born by induction. She
Yeah,
had terrible reflux. I'd never attributed, nobody ever suggested it might have been. I mean, her birth wasn't anywhere near as stressful as yours, to be fair. But
no,
I think induction is stressful for a baby, whatever.
yeah, and I don't know, and I'll never have any proof. But I know my second didn't have it, and we prepared that he would, but he didn't. And I know anecdotally from the women I speak to, it's the ones who've had tricky births in one way or another.
Mm,
Baby tends to have something like that. And I spoke to a lactation consultant, a local one, um, at the time, um, who gave great advice. And I didn't give her the credit she deserved, to be fair, because she was one voice of so many.
yes.
And my traumatized brain just did not know what to believe and what not to believe. But she was also a craniosacral therapist and talked about, a lot of babies who struggle with feeding. It's to do with tension, it's to do with, the body. And okay, if you had your waters broken and they sort of were in a funny position like that, that could make a difference. And at the time, I was like, oh, I don't know, like I'm not sure, and I kind of dismissed it. And actually, I think that probably had a lot to do with it.
It's such a shame we don't have that sort of that hindsight isn't available to us immediately because there's so much wisdom, isn't there, after the event, which you kind of would like the medics to have fought on your behalf, but
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should be able to trust the people who are experts in
who
this.
are paid. But then I often say, they're only an expert, they're never an expert in Shannon and her son. There's
Yeah.
only one time that you presented with that baby or with that combination of babies. So, and that's what I think is so messed up about it. I made
Yeah.
a video today saying the patriarchy is controlling birth because I believe they want us to be like machines, but we're not machines, and there isn't the nuance, except when let's get onto a more positive story, because you weren't going to let any of that happen again, were you? So tell me about your second baby.
The positive one always seems so much shorter, but
That's good. It often is. It really
yeah.
often is.
Um, I'm gonna have a light on. There you go. Um, yeah. So the my second birth, my second pregnancy. So I found out I was pregnant um very quickly. Um, and uh, even though we'd like to have more. We knew we wanted more than one. Um, I guess I wasn't mentally prepared for how quick that would happen, and I saw the line on that test, and I broke down. I was crying to my husband, like, I can't do it again. I can't do it again. I don't want them to hurt me again. Like, it's going to happen again. Like, I know what birth could be, and I know that I can do it, but we still live in this area. I can't let this happen again. And he was like, it's not going to. In the 3 years between my pregnancies, I had read everything, learned everything. I was in home birth forums. I knew that home birth was what I wanted. We had a fantastic standalone home birth team in this area. Um, None of those midwives were the ones I would have encountered. And we just knew that that was what we wanted to do. Um, and I took a while to even make the booking appointment. We found out with my first son, we found out we were pregnant quite late on, but with my second son, we found out very early. Um, and I just kind of didn't want to face it. I was scared. I'd done a lot of therapy, but we'd left that therapy on. The only thing that was ever gonna, I guess, really do the last bit of healing was to see it done better.
Yeah.
Um, and every birth is valid, but for me, it was the way that I was made to feel. Um, I could have had with my first one the exact same results, but if I was respected, it would have been better. And we knew that that was something I needed to strive for in the second one. And I went to my booking appointment when I finally made it. Um, and my husband and I had agreed that he would come to all appointments, and we would record them. And we were making no, we weren't hiding the fact we were recording them. Um, I did, I followed a hypnobirthing instructor, Erin, Better Birth UK is her company, and she did a brilliant blog post about how we should record appointments because we are only likely to remember, I think it's something like 15% of what's said in the appointment, and that the British Medical Association suggests we record appointments. And actually, if you tell your practitioner that you are recording it, often the care you receive is better. So we walked into the booking appointment. My husband hits record, and this midwife. We were lucky because my GP has an on-site midwife, so I didn't have to go to the hospital where all this happened.
Right.
Um, the midwife sort of looked at me, and I had this letter that was an outcome of our complaint from the first birth that basically said I'd had a really traumatic time, and that they are not to broach the subject of interventions. They can tell me if there's a problem, and I will ask the questions and I will choose my care. So they weren't to talk about induction and things like that. And it was on sort of headed paper, and it was signed by the head of midwifery. And I had that with me, and I sort of handed it to this midwife, shaking. And she read this letter and she signed it at the bottom. And she said, "Have you considered a home birth?" And like I relaxed because I thought that was going to be a fight, and it wasn't. She explained that she used to be on a dedicated home birth team, but they'd slowly whittled it down, and there was only one midwife on it now, but they were really good friends. Um, and so she's going to text her and get the last remaining home birth midwife to sort of take me on her caseload, and I wouldn't need to go to the hospital unless I wanted the scans, and I could have my appointments at home. And she said, if you're happy with that and that's what you want, we'll stop this appointment now. You don't need to tell me anything else. And you can have your booking appointment at home in the safety of your own home. If you want me to do it, I will. But if you prefer it that way, we can. And so we did. So she texted the last member of the home birth team, who then texted me, made me an appointment for a Saturday afternoon in my house. Um, and that appointment was like 2 hours long. Um, she wanted to hear as much of my story as I was happy to tell. Um, she offered everything, didn't say anything about what the guidelines suggest, just we would offer this. It's because of this. Do you want it? So even comparing like when they took the bloods to this to the first time, I knew what every blood test was for. I knew what they were testing. I knew why they were testing it. I knew what the outcome would be. So I knew, for example, that one of them was testing for something that you can't contract. So because I had the test in my first pregnancy, I didn't need it again. And I knew that when they were testing for my iron levels, if I was anemic, this would be what they suggest afterwards. I knew that the test for diabetes or like sugars would possibly um, indicate the need for a gluten tolerance test later on. And that allowed me to pick and choose. So I pretty much declined all the bloods. I think I had things like you can test for the things you normally test for in when you give blood, like hepatitis and stuff, but I don't really want anything else. Um, where they were fine with. Um, she could do that at home. I actually ended up having it done at the hospital during my scan anyway, but she was happy to do it at home. Um, and so my appointments were going really well. I had my scan at the hospital, and the sonographer kicked off that I was recording the appointment. Um, so that was a bit of an argument there. We were supposed to be there for 20 minutes. We were there for 4 hours. Um,
Wow.
yeah, similar behavior. Like she didn't like the fact I was recording. She said, well, I have to call my boss then, and we called her bluff and said, yeah, call your boss, it's fine. The boss came down to talk to me, tried to talk me out of it, said it was against their policy, and I said, well, it's recommended by the British Medical Association. So, and in the end, the head sonographer did my appointment, and all my scans from that point on. But that was the most pushback kind of we got. And then a few weeks into my pregnancy, they announced they were getting rid of the home birth team.
No.
Yeah. So home births would still happen, but they would be staffed by the community midwives. So it wouldn't be my midwife, it would be any midwife. And in labour, it was a case of there's a rota, but it depends how many other births are happening, and it depends if we've had to call them in somewhere else. And at this point, I thought, no, I'm not letting this happen again. Like, I can't. So I wrote quite a long letter to the head of midwifery, the director of the hospital. I copied in birth rights and our MP and said, this is my original birth story for my first birth. These are all the failings in the care that I had. Because of that, I want continuity of care at this time and a bespoke care plan. I did have that, but now you've shut the home birth team down. I'm not going to. So this is what I want. And they called us in for a meeting, and I thought it'd be a fight, but they agreed.
Amazing.
Um, and my home birth midwife, before she went, gave me one nice bit of advice. She said, they've agreed to it. Just ask if your appointments could be at home, because what they agreed was that I could have a named midwife, and why not make that named midwife the one that I met originally with my booking appointment at my GP, because I felt comfortable with her. She used to be the home birth team, and I could do it in my GP, not at the hospital. And my home birth midwife said, well, I know her, and your GP's round the corner, and you need evening appointments. Why not ask for it to be at home? It'll be on her way home. And so I did. I mean, I had that. So my appointments continued to be at home, which made a huge bit of difference. Like If they'd taken my blood pressure in the doctors, it would have been mad. Um, this midwife was happy with me declining everything, and pretty much the whole way through my pregnancy, I declined urine dips, I declined blood tests, I had no fundal height measurements, I didn't have any tests looking for a problem. I said I would have them if I felt like something was wrong or I showed any symptoms, but I wasn't having them for no reason. Um, and so I had a pretty undisturbed pregnancy. I kept having the appointments so that I could change my mind if I wanted to. And I quite liked listening into baby. Um, but I didn't have any of the tests sort of looking for an issue.
That's really, that is, I've never heard of that before. And well, I have, and as in somebody who had a wild pregnancy and a free birth, but
Yeah.
when you're under the system,
Yeah, yeah.
you decline because that's like preeclampsia, isn't it? Wheat,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
and
yeah,
the blood pressure and everything. Did you have your blood pressure taken?
yeah. Sometimes, but not as often as they wanted to. And I wouldn't have it anywhere except home. And towards the end, I stopped having it. Yeah, like the whole like preeclampsia thing, like I knew that could be dangerous. I knew someone who'd had it, but I also knew that the guidelines are shifting and they're starting to treat like any hypertensive disorders as possible preeclampsia. So you could just have high blood pressure on one day, which could be caused by numerous things, like how much you've eaten, like and that could immediately trigger preeclampsia, and there's no going back. So I
Yeah.
thought, do you know what? I'm going to look out for things like swelling and stuff like that because then I'll go and I'll ask for that test, but I'm not going to have them otherwise. And it brought up things from my first pregnancy that I didn't even think were weird. Like I remember every time I went for a urine dip, I really like was conscious about what I ate because they were and the blood tests because my dad was diabetic and I was worried that well, what if my sugars were high because I had something, before the
Mm.
appointment. And I realized that couldn't be healthy.
Yeah, of course. If you're in
Um,
a state of worry.
yeah. And I'm basically manipulating the test. I'm worried, oh, what if they find this? So I'm just not going to eat that much. Or I'm just going to have
Mm.
loads of water beforehand and like dilute everything. And I thought, no, do you know what? I'm more scared of the outcome of these tests in terms of intervention than I am of what they're testing for. And actually, I'd rather be led by my body. And if I see a symptom, then go and get that investigated like you would in any other time in your life.
Yeah.
We don't go and have x-rays because, just in case we've broken our leg, we don't do that. So it,
A really good way of looking at it. And it really illustrates the whole problems and issues with maternity is that it's all defense, 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 defense.
yeah,
Because they're waiting for somebody to come and whack them with a big litigation.
yeah. And there's so many problems they're looking for now. Baby's too big and too small and this and that and this and it's just too much,
Mm.
I mean, fundal height measurements, I had them before, and this time I didn't because if I needed a wee, it was going to be more than if I didn't. It just seemed to be so
Yeah.
like random. So I didn't have any of it. And it meant that I wasn't nervous about the appointment. And so I had, yeah, I guess not a wild pregnancy, but kind of one.
Mm.
And I think because I'd argued so much early on, um, they didn't argue with me.
Brilliant.
They accepted it. The only kind of pushback we got was that scan appointment. And once the head of midwifery was emailing back and forth with my husband, I didn't want to see the emails on my phone. So she's emailing with him. And she'd agreed the same as everyone else. We're not going to force induction. We're not going to coerce. We're not going to talk about that. And she offhand mentioned, but obviously, if you get to 42 weeks, then we're going to induce. And my husband emailed back and said, I think you've just broken like a contract you've kind of signed. um, so then we got this like written apology. And uh, I got to about 24 weeks. And I've been listening to podcasts with birth stories. And I found myself searching for free birth ones. Um, and free birth is something that this is why I argued so much with the hospital. I'd always insisted I didn't want a free birth. I didn't want to feel like I had to do it alone. And um, so I was quite surprised that I found myself not feeling forced into that, but wanting that. Um, whenever I thought about my birth, when we started to do my birth plan, I wasn't nervous about the contraction pain. I'd done 9.5 centimeters before while arguing, while lacking oxytocin. I wasn't nervous about something going wrong. Baby was breech for quite a while in pregnancy, and I wasn't nervous about that either. The only thing I was nervous about was calling the midwives. And so I floated the idea to my husband, and he was like, yeah, okay. So we learned as much as we could about free birth. Um, we did some online courses and stuff. Um, we wrote two birth plans with only effectively one word different, which was that our plan was to free birth. Um, I didn't give that one to the hospital. I felt like the care that I'd received was mean in the past. And I thought if there were two women labouring on the same night and I did decide to call the midwives, I feel like they would choose not to send someone to me if I'd said I was going to free birth.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I thought, I'm not going to tell them that part. I want to keep my options open.
Hmm.
So my birth plan said I'll call them if and when I need to. Um, and so we did quite a meticulous birth plan, and I had a backup plan if anything went wrong, which they also didn't like. My backup plan was a maternal led C-section, which you probably know, but if people don't, is where they would guide my hands down and I would lift baby out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I'd heard some birth stories that were those, and I thought if you've got to have, like, if intervention's needed and you've got to have it, like, why not make it beautiful? And that sounded like the best option. So I thought if I did find something in pregnancy that went wrong that meant that I couldn't go for my free birth, then that's my backup plan. Because of that backup plan, we had to meet with the consultant midwife. Um, and she listened to me and she sort of approved my whole birth plan. And we got to that part and she was like, look, we've just never done one. Like, they're not going to do it. And I said, no, that's that's my only backup plan. Like, I want that. And she sort of looked me in the eye and she said, tell me why. And I said to her, I felt like my birth was stolen from me the first time and it affected the person I was. Um, I want to birth my baby this time, come hell or high water. I want to feel it and I want to do it. And she said, that's enough reason for me. And she got a notepad out. She was drawing how it would happen and that right, the placenta would be passed around the curtain. This would happen. And she went back to the hospital and it took her a couple of weeks and she came back to us and she said, your local hospital? Nah, absolutely point blank refused. But the other one, it's only a little bit further away, they're up for it. They'll do it.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that was my backup plan that we hope we wouldn't have to use. Um, and yeah, similar story. I went to 41 weeks this time and I woke up exactly the same time, 7:30 in the morning with twinges. Um, and I ignored it for a bit. My husband got up with my eldest son and I came down about an hour later and sort of sat down and my husband was on the phone to his parents and I must have made a face because he sort of went, you're right. And I was like, I think I kind of didn't want to admit it at that point. Um, and he sort of wrapped the phone call up with his parents and he spoke to me a bit and he's like, I said, I think so. Like, I think they're quite regular, but like, I'm not sure. there was still, and there always was going to be an element of me not trusting my body this time.
Mm.
Um, and my little 3-year-old was like, Mummy, what is up? And I said, I've got a tummy ache. And he went, I will get you an ice pack. And he ran into the kitchen and he got one of his little ice packs out the freezer and he held it on my tummy. Um, and my husband called his parents back and arranged for them to come and get our eldest son. That was the plan. While I went in the bar and I was watching Friends, I was trying to laugh. I probably know every word off by heart, but
Not the one where Rachel has a baby, please.
no, no. Um, but yeah, I was watching that and I out the bath and I lost my plug and I thought, okay, this is definitely it. And I sort of laid in the bed for a bit and I was listening to like relaxation tracks and um my husband had that thing to do because this time it was just me and him. So he was arranging for my son to get picked up and he was setting up a birth pool. Um and I asked him to go up and put the TENS machine on, which he did. And I was probably a bit far gone for that. Like it was only 11 a.m. and I only felt things at 7:30. But by this point, it was quite established. And then they collected my son and I came downstairs and I sort of laid in the living room for a bit while my husband set the pool up. Um, and I was getting to a point where I was quite struggling with it. And my husband put music on. And I just remember going, I love this song and just completely relaxed for a bit longer. Um, and then I got in the pool and it was lovely. Um, and then I started to tell my husband, like, oh, it's really intense. It's really intense. Um, and like I think they're really close together. And we weren't timing them, but he was like, no, yeah, like they are, like, you know. And I said, but I've not even been in the pool very long. Like he was like, you've been in here 2 hours. um, and I was like, oh, okay. And I kept saying, I think I need to call the midwives. I think something's wrong. Like it's really intense and it's really not been very long. And he was amazing, my husband. He talked a lot about regretting the way he was in the first birth. And actually he wasn't bad. Like, he did advocate for me, but in this one, he learned a lot more and he was amazing. And he'd learned one technique, which was if the birther asked for something off their birth plan, and it seems to be quite established, it could be transition, like ask them to wait 10 minutes. So I said, I think I need to call the midwife. Something's wrong. I know it wasn't our plan, but something's wrong. And he went, let's just wait 10 minutes. And we did. And it was a lot longer than 10 minutes. But yeah. And I started to ask again. And he went, how about I get in the pool with you? I was like, oh, I'd like that. So he got in the pool with me. And again, in my head, he was in there 2 minutes, but he was in there ages. We've got it on video. We had a camera up in the corner. Partly because I wanted to see, and also I thought if we call anyone, like we've got that there. And so I'm relaxed with him in the pool, and it's weird. Like I watched the video back, and whenever I sort of let go and switch that thinking brain off, I'm fine. You can see the contractions come, and I just deal with it and then carry on. It's when I switch it back on, go, no, 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 I can't get past 9.5 centimeters. Like I couldn't do it last time. That I'm feeling it more. And
Mm.
it's like watching two different people in this video. Like it's really interesting. And so my husband's in the pool with me and I'm very relaxed with him. And then I start, my brain's going again and I start to say, no, 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 no. Like I feel like baby's coming out now and that can't be right. So we need to call them. And so he said, okay, yeah, we'll call them. But obviously I've got to get out the pool and I've got to get dressed. Like I'm just in my pants, I've got to get dressed. So I'll go do that. So he gets out the pool and he leaves. And again, if you look back at the video, he leaves, everyone's gone, and I'm just very quietly calm. I've got no one to voice these scary thoughts to, and I just forget about it. So it's clearly like that trauma still lingering.
Yeah.
Um, and he comes back in and he goes, do you know what? They're going to have a go at you for not having a wee. So let's get you out for a wee before we call them. And I went, okay. And I stand up in the birth pool And I'm like I'm describing to him. I'm like, God, no, I can't do it. I can't get out. I can't do it. Oh, like, let's just go and like have a C-section or like an epidural. And he's like, okay, like, I know you're never going to say that. And I was like, I feel really open. I can't describe it, like open. And he's like, well, let's go for a wee and then we'll see what we need to do from there. And I was like, you'll call them. You promise something's wrong. And he said, yeah, yeah, I will. Why are you going for a wee? And so I get out my pool and I walk across the corridor into my little toilet and sit on the toilet backwards. And then you can hear me on the video. I scream to my husband, "Oh, my waters have gone." And I went, "Oh, there's a head." And then you can hear me scream to her on the video, "I'm doing it. I'm actually doing it."
Oh,
Um, yeah, and then my husband sort of runs in. You can see him on the video, run into the sort of get towels and things, then run back out. Um, and then baby came, and you can hear me scream, "I did it! I did it!"
yeah.
Um, and I walk back in with baby. I mean, I leave the room, I leave the birth pool at 2 o'clock, and at 2:36, I walk back in with the baby.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I said, I'm getting back in that pool. And I stepped back over the side, didn't even use the little step that we had, stepped back over the side, and I cuddle baby in the pool. And my husband took a fantastic picture of me where I literally look like I'm on top of the world. Like, I'm like mouth open, like completely. Um, I cuddle baby in the pool for a bit, and then um, we chose to have my placenta encapsulated. Um, and there's not really any evidence for that, but anecdotally, lots of women say that it really helped their mental health.
Yeah.
Um, and so my husband called the lady who was doing that. She's also a doula, and she went, "Do you mind putting me on speakerphone?" And he put her on speakerphone, and she was really like praising and lovely. Um, and she said, get out the pool, birth center on land. So I get out of the pool and I feed baby for a bit. And then I said to my husband, I need to go to the toilet. So we put like cling film in and the placenta came out. I sort of just knew it was going to do it. Um, and then baby's still attached with the cord. We've got lovely pictures of him still attached to the placenta. And when we were ready, I think it was about an hour and a bit later, we cut the cord. Um, we had a little cord tie, and then we called the hospital. And they didn't know what to do with themselves. My husband said, "We've had a baby." And they went, "Where?" We said, "At home." And they went, "Oh, good, put your midwife on." And we went, "There isn't one here." And they were like, "Oh, you need an ambulance." We were like, "No, it was an hour ago. We were fine." They were
No.
like, "Oh, can you hold a minute?" When they came back on, they were like, "Do you want someone to come and check or something?" And I said, "Yeah, but I want my normal midwife." Um, And they said, "Okay, but she doesn't start till 8." And this was sort of, 3, half 3, 4. We're like, "That's fine." Um,
Get it.
so we chilled. My husband started packing up the pool and I just cuddled baby. And then my midwife turned up at like half 8. Um, checked baby over, kept talking about how healthy he was. Um,
Kept talking about what?
how healthy he looked and how healthy he was and what a lovely colour he was. And I was sort of giggling because when we were going through my birth plan in pregnancy, they talked about not leaving them attached to the cord too long, like long enough, but not too long. And they'd also talked about how baby has to have a hat because they'll be so cold and they'll have to have one. And I said, I don't want them to have a hat because I want to smell them. It helps with breastfeeding. And obviously, we had baby, we didn't cut the cord, and baby was wearing nothing. But they kept saying he's lovely and warm, he's a lovely colour. Like, yeah, all that arguing for nothing. Um,
Crazy.
and they checked me over, and I had a tear. And another argument I had in pregnancy was that if I'd had a first or second degree tear, and there was no reason I didn't want stitches because the stitches caused me loads of issues the first time. And they sort of argued that no, you'll bleed, it'll be awful. And she checked me over and went, "You have got a tear, a second degree tear, but it's not bleeding. Do you want stitches?" I was like, "No, I'm good. It's fine." Um, Yeah, and then we ordered pizza and then we went to bed. Um,
Bish bosh.
yeah, my husband describes it as we started our day, we stopped for a bit, had a baby, and then carried on with our day. Um,
And was it healing?
absolutely. Within minutes of having him, I was like, I want to go out, I want to go show everyone. I just felt like someone had removed the weight of the world from my shoulders. Yeah. And I said before, like, for me, like, free birth was what I was drawn to, but it didn't have to be that. It was just that I proved to myself that I could do it, and that all of that kind of stuff that I dealt with the first time wasn't my fault.
Of course, it wasn't your fault. It was never your fault. But
No.
I understand. I think women generally, we do, it's a bad habit we have of
Yeah.
rather than, not that even necessarily, I mean, I think these people are, well, I always give them the benefit of the doubt that they're individuals within a very difficult system and there's all sorts of pressures that we don't see. But it was never your fault. Definitely not your fault.
I think because a lot of it the first time felt like punitive care. It felt like the more I said no, the more
Yeah.
things they tried to do. Because everyone I've told about the epidural went, why? At 9.5 centimeters. Even the consultant midwife went, that makes no sense.
It makes no sense. It almost, I mean, the whole faff of getting a bloody epidural on, you probably could have had your baby, like they were saying, the baby's on
Yeah,
the way.
exactly. And so the whole thing just felt like, yeah, like I was being punished, like knowing like what I wanted. And that I wasn't being, I guess, that stereotypical first time mum who was just sort of agreeing with everything. Yeah. So the second time, obviously there wasn't anyone there. And so the one thing I guess it hasn't healed is my trust in medical professionals entirely. But I met some great ones. And had I not, I probably wouldn't have gone the way I did. Um, but no, completely healing. And I just, my relationship with both my sons is different. Um, and I'm not gonna lie, I have questioned like my bond with the two of them. Is it different because of their birth? Because I immediately just knew everything the second one wanted and needed, and just a complete instinct. But I think it was there with my first, but I questioned it at every
Yeah.
turn. I thought I'd been bullied into thinking that my thoughts were wrong. And so I ignored my instinct the first time, whereas this time I didn't. We spent a long time with my first son, trying to get him in the cart, like trying to make him take a bottle, trying to make him do this. And with my second, we co-slept. I wore him all the time. Like I carried him around. He's never taken a bottle. Um,
And but remember this as well. I mean, I have similar experiences. I had an induction followed by a home birth. And I did have those experiences, but you are also a parent. You haven't gone through the Rubicon of becoming a parent.
yeah,
So
yeah,
things that you've never even thought of, you've experienced.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I do think birth experience does make a difference to bonding, but I think also different people, different individual baby, different life stage for you.
And
Because
it's just a different relationship. It's not a poor one. I was fiercely protective of my firstborn, you know, um, more so than I think you'd normally expect. And not in a helicopter parent kind of way, but he sort of taught me to fight because everything that happened through my pregnancy, like he gave me that strength the day after labor to go, I'm leaving. This is the problem. Being here is the problem. And I kept that.
and it sounds like
Um,
you were actually incredibly strong in and you've turned the story around, haven't you? Because you've trained to do something to help other women along the line. So
yeah.
just
So
in the last few minutes, do you want to just tell me what you're doing now? Because it's exciting.
yes. Um, so I loved in both my pregnancy learning all about birth and physiology and what amazing things women were capable of.
Yeah.
And I was very drawn to antenatal education and hypnobirthing and things like that. And I'm a teacher anyway, so it felt like a really lovely sidestep. And I didn't have the confidence, I guess, after my first birth to completely commit to that. Um, but now I do. And I think that my two experiences being so contrasting is a big asset. Um,
Definitely.
and so I'm on maternity leave right now, but I've been training as a hypnobirthing and antenatal teacher. So I've just finished my training, and I'm just in the sort of midst of launching my business to hopefully help women get the best experience they can. And if they're in the situation I was in the first place, they know what they can say no to and they know ways to navigate those conversations. And if they're wanting the experience I had the second time, then they're educated enough to go for that.
Fantastic. And what's the name of your new company?
Doughty Birth Company.
So what?
Um, Doughty Birth Company.
Doughty.
Is my surname.
Oh,
But it means brave and persistent.
amazing.
Oh,
I think it's fair to say, Shannon, that you are brave and persistent. And I'm obviously going to put all those links in the show notes.
thank you.
And I just want to thank you so much for sharing so honestly, really quite, I mean, challenging and hugely inspiring stories.
Thank you. Yeah, I think people need to hear
They
the good
do.
and the ugly.
Yes. And I think we hide that stuff away, but it is happening to a lot and a lot of women every day. So thank you so much for
No,
bringing it out of the shadows.
thank you so much.
And thank you for sharing yourself with us all this evening.
No, thank you.
I've been Emma, and this has been Shannon, and we wish you all a peaceful onward day. Say goodbye if you want, but you don't have to.
Bye. Thank you.